The first time Anakin fought Count Dooku, he lost an arm. The last time, Dooku lost both. Dooku was no Jedi anymore, but he was trained by the same order Anakin was about to destroy. A former Jedi Master taught by Yoda himself still could not stop what the Chosen One had become. Soon after, Anakin walked into the Jedi Temple with the 501st behind him. He had used Form 5 for years, but now, the same lightsaber style he once used to protect people moved with all the anger and hatred he used to hold back. For the Jedi inside the temple, that meant facing one of their own forms without the limits that were supposed to guide it. And that is what made Anakin's Form 5 the perfect Jedi killer, except against one. Form 5 began with a problem the Jedi already understood. Its predecessor, Form 3 Sorisu, was one of the greatest defensive styles the Order ever created. It could keep a Jedi alive under pressure for a very long time, but that was also the issue. If the form only prolonged the fight, the enemy still had room to keep attacking. The Jedi also knew the other extreme. Form 4 Ataru could overwhelm an opponent quickly, but it demanded space, freedom of movement, and energy. If the initial burst did not end the fight, the user could be left exposed. So Form 5 answered from the middle. It was created for a Jedi who could not afford to stand behind defense forever, but also could not abandon it completely. It was more active than Sorisu and more grounded than Ataru. Its first branch was Shien. The idea was simple. When blaster fire came in, the Jedi didn't only block it away, they sent it back, forcing the opponent to answer for the attack. Then the same idea moved into blade combat. That was the second branch, Gem So. Against another lightsaber, Gem So used blocks and parries as the beginning of pressure. The opponent struck, the counter came before the attacker could settle again. It was still a Jedi form, but one of the Order's most forceful answers to violence. In the hands of a disciplined Jedi, it could protect life without trapping the fighter behind their own guard. In Anakin's hands, the same form became more dangerous because it fit the part of him that Jedi kept trying to control. He was skilled in both sides of the form. It worked so well for Anakin because every part of him wanted the danger ended before it could take more from him. It began on Tatooine. Anakin was born with immense power, but almost no control over his own life. He could see things before they happened, build machines most adults didn't understand, and win a pod race no human should have survived. But none of that changed the fact that he was still a slave. Even when Qui-Gon gave him a way out, freedom left something behind. Anakin could leave Tatooine, but his mother could not. The Jedi took him into a larger world, while the person he loved most remained behind with no protection. Years later, that wound opened again. Anakin saw his mother in dreams and knew she was suffering. He crossed the desert to find her, but reached the Tusken camp too late. Shmi died in his arms, and the lesson he took from it was that power meant very little if it arrived after the loss had already happened. On Geonosis, Dooku carved the same lesson into his body. Anakin rushed because he wanted the fight finished, but he was not ready to finish it. The Count punished him for it and took his arm. But even that defeat did not teach him to wait. It taught him that the next time he needed enough power to make it work. That was where Form 5 fit him. It gave Anakin a method for something he already believed. Meet the threat, take the force of it, and send it back before it could take anything else. And the war was about to prove that belief right. Battles moved too quickly for the kind of patience the Temple preached, and rescue missions could collapse while the Jedi Council waited for the perfect answer. Again and again, Anakin found himself in situations where hesitation equaled failure. So he moved first, and many times it worked. When the senator escorting Satine held a detonator and threatened to destroy the ship, Obi-Wan could stop him right there. But killing him meant doing it in front of Satine, his beloved woman who had built her life around refusing violence. He hesitated. Anakin, on the other hand, did not. He saw the threat and ended it. The same pattern shaped the battle over Christophsis. Obi-Wan introduced Anakin to a prototype stealth ship and wanted him to slip through the blockade to deliver supplies to the forces on the surface. It was supposed to be a support tool and not a weapon. But Anakin made it both. He used the ship to destroy the Separatist flagship with its own missiles and then delivered the supplies. Every success pushed the same idea deeper into Anakin's head. Danger had to be answered immediately. And that was the Anakin Dooku kept meeting throughout the war. For Dooku, everything began on Geonosis. The Count let him rush in, took over the pace, and cut off his right forearm. It was a clean lesson. After that, Dooku became the mark Anakin kept trying to reach. Their next major duel came during the mission to return Jabba's son. Anakin had Ahsoka with him now, and he was no longer the same Padawan who rushed across the hangar on Geonosis. Dooku noticed it.
Your training has come a long way, boy.
Anakin fought hard enough to knock the Count back and even kick him in the face, until Ahsoka needed him more than the duel did, so he broke off to save her instead. He fought him again on Naboo, where Dooku had Magna Guards waiting. The duel ended with Anakin captured and then handed over in exchange for General Grievous. Later, during the attempt to kidnap Palpatine, the pattern began to change. Anakin cut through Dooku's Magna Guards and fought the Count with enough force to make him cautious. And for the first time, Dooku was the one who had to run. Their last on-screen fight before the Invisible Hand came on Oba Dia. Anakin and Obi-Wan were following the trail of Sifo Dyas, the dead Jedi tied to the creation of the Clone Army. The Pikes knew the name of the man behind it, Tyrannus. When that name reached the Jedi, Dooku was no longer only the separatist leader they had been fighting for years. He was connected to the mystery behind the army they had been leading since the war began. That made the duel heavier. Dooku handled Anakin and Obi-Wan carefully. He pushed Anakin into defense and drew Obi-Wan into attack, reversing the balance they usually wanted. And for a moment, it worked. But the fight kept closing around him. Anakin and Obi-Wan pressed him with the help from the Pikes, and when Dooku tried to break away, Obi-Wan used the Force to push Anakin after him. Suddenly, the Count was facing Anakin directly, with the space between them gone and no clean room left to manage the fight. So, Dooku had to run again. This time, the duel didn't end with Anakin beaten. It ended with Dooku refusing to risk the next exchange. The Count still survived, but the gap between them changed again. Anakin was becoming the one opponent Dooku could not afford to let get too close. By the time they met on the Invisible Hand, Dooku had years of evidence in front of him. He beat Anakin when the boy was less experienced, watched him improve across the war, and still saw the same traits every time: anger, impatience, and the need to make the fight end quickly. That was why Dooku trusted the old answer. Obi-Wan and Anakin entered together. Dooku stood across from them, and Palpatine observed. The Count had survived this arrangement before, and when he knocked Obi-Wan out, the fight returned into the shape he understood best. Once again, it was Dooku against Anakin. So, he reached for the same weakness. He taunted Anakin and tried to break his balance. And his plan worked in one sense. Anakin's anger came up and the fight became more personal. Dooku had seen that before, and every part of his experience told him what should happen next. But the attacks grew heavier. Every exchange drove Dooku back into less space than before. This time, Anakin rushed with enough strength and control to win once and for all. The duel was over. Palpatine gave the order to kill him. For a moment, the Jedi teaching still held. But then Palpatine pushed and Anakin obeyed. That was the final lesson Dooku gave him. Anakin finally surpassed the man who took his arm, but the victory brought him closer to Sidious. Dooku proved how far Anakin's strength had come, and his death proved where it was going next. After Mace Windu fell, Darth Vader was sent to the Jedi Temple with the 501st Legion. Across the galaxy, Order 66 turned clone soldiers against the Jedi they had served beside for years. On Coruscant, the attack came right through the front door. The Jedi were used to enemies coming from outside the Order. But this time, the person leading the assault was one of their own strongest knights. Anakin trained here. He knew the way the Jedi reacted under pressure, and more importantly, he knew how Jedi fought. By this point, the dark side had changed how he used his power. Anakin always fought with anger close to the surface, but before this moment, he still had lines he was trying not to cross. After choosing Sidious, those lines were gone. The fear, the anger, and hatred he carried for years now moved straight into his attacks. That made his fighting style more dangerous than it had ever been. Gemso already fit Anakin because it rewarded physical strength, pressure, and fast movements. Against Jedi, that became a serious problem. Most of them were trained to defend first, stay controlled, and look for the right moment to respond. That kind of discipline could work against a normal attacker, but against Vader it gave him more time to build pressure. He only needed a Jedi to meet his blade and try to hold him off. And once they did, Form 5 let him keep the pressure moving from one exchange to the next, making every clash harder to absorb. The 501st made it worse. The clones split the Jedi's attention and turned the assault into chaos. Anakin didn't have to fight every Jedi in a clean duel, he only had to take advantage of the confusion around him. A Jedi forced to deal with blaster fire, collapsing defenses, and Vader coming at them with a lightsaber had almost no room to recover. The Jedi created Form 5 because defense could not always stay passive. But Anakin pushed that idea further because the restraint was gone. Some Jedi were cut down before they could understand the scale of what was happening. Others fought back and still could not stop him. The younglings had even less of a chance because the high ground lesson was not covered until later in the curriculum. But most importantly, even the best Jedi defenders could not hold him. Temple Battlemaster Sin Dralik, one of the Jedi most connected to the Order's lightsaber training, fell during the assault. In the recording Obi-Wan later watched, Anakin fought Dralik with one hand while choking another Jedi with the other. That showed the level Anakin had reached. He could stand in front of one of the Temple's best swordsmen and still have enough power left to kill someone else at the same time. Against most Jedi, that made the fight almost impossible. If they defended, he kept pressing. If they stepped back, he took the ground. And if they hesitated, he used the moment before they recovered. The Temple Massacre showed why his style worked so well against the Order. Form 5 let him keep turning each exchange forward, and the dark side gave him the power to do it without the restraint he still had as a Jedi. By the time most Jedi understood what they were facing, Vader was already too close. But the next Jedi he faced would prove Vader had still much to learn. Obi-Wan knew how Anakin fought better than anyone. He trained him, fought beside him through the Clone Wars, and watched the same habits appear long before the dark side took over. He knew how quickly Anakin tried to take control once the blades crossed. He knew that Anakin hated a fight that refused to end quickly. But Mustafar was not only about style. By the time Anakin reached that duel, his mind was collapsing around the power he had just gained. He had betrayed the Jedi, killed the Separatist leaders, and turned his anger on Padme. Every step pushed him deeper into the belief that he had gone too far to turn back. The dark side made him stronger, but it also made him reckless with that strength. That was the version of Anakin Obi-Wan had to survive. He was facing the strongest opponent he had ever fought, someone more powerful than before, less stable than ever, and convinced that enough force could break through any fight. So Risu gave Obi-Wan the right way to answer him. He did not have to match Anakin's strength directly, he just had to stay alive long enough for Anakin's own choices to catch up with him. So Obi-Wan kept the duel under control as much as he could. He gave ground when the fight demanded it, chose safer positions, and refused to chase the kind of opening Anakin wanted him to take. The longer the duel went, the more Anakin's confidence worked against him. Dooku had fallen, the Temple had fallen, the Separatist leaders had fallen. In a single night, almost everything in front of him had broken. Obi-Wan was the first opponent who did not break fast enough, and that made Anakin push harder, instead of thinking more clearly. By the time they reached the high ground, Obi-Wan understood the fight better than Anakin did. The position gave Anakin a choice. He could stop, accept the disadvantage, and find another way. Or he could treat the warning like one more thing his power could overcome. Obi-Wan warned him because he knew which choice Anakin would make. Anakin jumped anyway, and that was the point where his power finally outran his control. The same confidence that made him terrifying in the Temple left him unable to accept a fight he could no longer force open. Obi-Wan did not beat Anakin by being stronger. He survived long enough for Anakin to make the mistake that only Anakin would make. And Form 5 made Anakin so deadly against Jedi because most of them could not survive that pressure long enough to see the flaw behind it. But Obi-Wan could. He knew the form, he knew the fighter behind it, and stayed disciplined while Anakin destroyed himself trying to win. And since Obi-Wan comes out of this looking a little too good, watch this next, where I prove Obi-Wan is the real villain of A New Hope in 10 minutes.